Ma, a psychological thriller about a lonely black woman named Sue-Ann living in a small town who befriends a group of high schoolers, allowing them free rein to turn up in her basement. Initially, the teens think shit is sweet, but things inevitably turn sour when they realize Sue-Ann has more than a few issues lying beneath the surface. I remember my friends and I being sat up in the theater when this film dropped back in 2019, based off the premise alone, yet the details of the plot were murky in my mind. A comment left on my Ugly Betty video, asking for my thoughts on the parallels between Octavia Spencer's character in Ugly Betty and her character in Ma, led me to rewatch the film and drop this video. After revisiting the film and digging into the film's credits and creation, my nosy ass stumbled upon a gaggle of reviews to find a constant word popping up in discussion of the film: mammy. Given the film's title, a preliminary glance at the optics of Sue-Ann's dynamics with the teens, and Octavia Spencer's prior role and relationship with the film's director, Tate Taylor, one's thoughts might hone in on the mammy. While the film could have served as a subversion of the mammy, a deeper dive into the actual contents of the film shines a brazen light on desirability and an unconscious exposure of white guilt and anxiety in the face of anti-blackness. Subverting the mammy? Looking at the film's premise, coupled with the broader context of the film, I can sorta kinda understand why conversations around the mammy might bubble to the surface initially. For a quick refresher, the mammy functions as a faithful, obedient domestic servant, historically loving, nurturing, and caring to white children and families. She manifests physically as a dark-skinned, fat black woman who holds some authority in the domestic sphere and receives love from those she cares for, yet is ever aware and accepting of her place as subordinate. Tate Taylor, the film's director, and a raggedy-ass white man with a drag currently being queued up from yours truly, previously worked with Octavia Spencer on The Help. In an interview with The Beat, Taylor, longtime friend of Spencer, stated that prior to reading the script for Ma, Spencer had confided with him about her frustrations, getting offered the same parts, same types of characters, and never being the lead. After getting his paws on the script for Ma, he immediately suggested Spencer for the role, hoping to afford an opportunity to get his dear friend her first lead role in something that could redefine her career. Given Taylor and Spencer's previous collab, and the premise of Ma invokes imagery of an older dark-skinned black woman, nicknamed Ma, cultivating a relationship with a group of predominantly white children, it's fair to see how invocations of the mammy might arise, even more so when looking at the potential of Taylor in the wake of the mess that was The Help, attempting to fashion a film that subverts the controlling image of the mammy, presenting us with a character, Sue-Ann, who flips the symptoms of the mammy on their head, no longer a subservient figure existing at the whim of white children, but one with agency, who wields autonomy, seeks out their own desires, and enacts harm on white children. Quite literally, slashing Octavia Spencer out of this misogynoiristic mold she had been prescribed a majority of her acting career. However, upon rewatching the film, it's evident Ma doesn't subvert the mammy for two main reasons. One, Sue-Ann simply does not exist as a mammy stereotype. And two, subverting the mammy would require, at bare minimum, an understanding and acknowledgement of racial dynamics, something this film and Tate Taylor unequivocally lack. The inclination to slap the mammy label on Sue-Ann is indicative of Spencer's prior collab with Taylor in The Help, but more glaringly, it's indicative of how society perceives women who look like Spencer. Outside physical appearance and the moniker bestowed on Sue-Ann, she simply does not fit the controlling image of the mammy, though she's significantly older than the teenagers whose friend group she infiltrates. She exists not as a nurturing mother figure for the children, but as a cool mom engaging in increasingly inappropriate friendship with these kids. The desire is at the root of her pursuing a relationship with these kids, further removing her from the mammy label. Mammy's lives are dedicated to caring to white children and families. Narratively, the mammy exists in service to whiteness and the desires of whiteness. Sue-Ann directly defies this by seeking a relationship with the teens to satisfy her own desires, to relive her school days. Sue-Ann is not a narrative tool existing to service whiteness being the predominantly white group of teens and their needs or desires. Rather, the teens exist as tools for Sue-Ann to fulfill her own desires. They are a means to an end, an end that quickly devolves from jello shots and delusions of reimagined friendship to a deadly-ass lickback. Unfortunately for the teens, the benefits they're reaping from their wayward relationship with Soo-an are enough for all of them, outside Maggie, to constantly overlook the danger and power Soo-an wields in their dynamic. Their predisposition to hit the bird box whenever a red flag is thrust in their face is due partially to the naivety of youth, but more so due to a key concept embedded in the overall narrative: desirability. But we're gonna park that thought here and circle back to it later. This film could have functioned as a subversion of the mammy, given the context of Octavia Spencer's previous roles, combined with her role on screen the last time her and Taylor linked up. However, as I mentioned before, for the subversion of the mammy to occur, the film would need to confront and tackle the obvious racial aspects of the plot. Unfortunately, yet unsurprisingly, Taylor makes it clear that race shit gets left at the door when he's in the room. It's important to lay the groundwork for my drag by explaining Taylor's focus when developing Ma was to tell a story about what can happen to people who experience trauma and who is accountable for the trauma dealt. He reveals as much himself in an interview with The Beat, where he states, "We," in reference to himself and Octavia Spencer, "were both excited to comment on victims of trauma and show what it can actually do to somebody's developing brain." Yet, the exploration of trauma was piss poor, lacking any depth because of his inability to dissect or even acknowledge the racial dynamics hanging over the film and underscoring the violence occurring. When asked in an interview with GQ about the clear racial dynamics between Soo-an as a child, a victim of racialized violence in a predominantly white town, and Soo-an's dynamic as a black woman with a group of predominantly white teens, this was Taylor's response. "Isn't it funny, the way our country is set up? The minute I give a very good friend a part because she wanted to break out, the movie becomes about race. It's crazy." Yes, so crazy. Absolutely unfathomable how people can look at the plot of Ma and dare to think of the racial implications. I'm flabbergasted, truly. It's even more telling upon learning Taylor could account for the gender dynamics at play in the creation of Soo-an's character, as he states later in the same interview when asked about opting to make Soo-an a woman. "The minute it's a man, you just know something's up. I think if it was a man, it would have immediately been perceived as something sexual on the way, and it would have been really inappropriate. I don't know if that's a double standard, but a man taking people alcohol is considered to be much darker." Taylor can understand the ways with which Soo-an being a woman is vital to fostering such a relationship with these children, yet tugging at the race wig is just people doing too much and making a mountain out of a molehill. Alright, but it's completely fine to invoke race into the plot for shits and giggles and the surface level meta skim of the roles available to black actors, like when Soo-an paints Darrell's face white, the only black kid in the group, asserting that,
"I'm sorry, Darrell. They've only got room for one of us."
And why? Because Taylor don't got the depth, wherewithal, and frankly, clearly doesn't give much of a damn about systems of oppression that hold his feet to the fire. Even in his analysis of gender, he talks about a possible double standard existing that allows women interacting with a group of children to be perceived with less scrutiny than if it were a man. What he fails to realize from his seat of privilege is it's not an alleged double standard, but patriarchy and misogyny, which labels women as innately nurturing, that allows this to occur. It's hilarious really because he's showing his nasty ass slip every time he opens his mouth to speak. Tate Taylor's inability to dissect the racial dynamics in the film reveal a lack of understanding of what is at the root of Octavia Spencer's decades-long typecasting, anti-blackness, and fat phobia, though the two go hand in hand. It is because Spencer exists as a fat, darker-skinned black woman in an industry and world built on white supremacy that she struggled securing roles outside a maid or care worker or being cast as a lead. This blatant disregard for racial dynamics in real life is mirrored in his refusal to dissect the clear race dynamics between Soo-an and both sets of teens in the film, her peers when she was a youth and the teens in present day. Taylor's refusal to implicate race in the sexual assault Soo-an experienced at the hand of her white peers and in her dynamic with the teens in present day pertaining to desirability and power flattened her overall trauma and depiction, while exposing his own prejudice through his race-blind approach, as is often the case. Taylor sought out to redefine Spencer's acting career through her role as Soo-an, and one can argue he succeeded, yet Notice how it ain't no applause coming from me, because why should I applaud a monkey for dancing? A monkey yet to acknowledge the role he played in Spencer's misogynoiristic typecasting, mind you, especially when said monkey dancing resulted in me being served a near empty plate of half-baked trauma and violence, tossed in piss-poor pacing and abysmal tonal choices that stunted the overall portrayal of Sue-Ann as a villain. Yeah, I'm not hungry. Though the film suffered horrendously from its poor pacing and tonal choices, both working in tandem to undermine the villainy of our antagonist Sue-Ann, the film does serve to offer meaningful introspection into desirability. Desirability.
How does it feel to be on the outside looking in? Hurts, huh? Well, I can assure you that the view from the center is amazing.
Circling back, the teen's reasons for overlooking the danger Ma poses and power she wields all lead back to desirability, and as much as Taylor would love to ignore it, race. I want to make clear, when I speak of desire and desirability, I'm referring to what Deshaun Harrison defines in Belly of the Beast as the social, political, and economic capital one obtains or is given access to through their ability to be desire. In other words, not looking at desirability through a lens predicated by how one might feel, but looking at desirability through what one socially and structurally has access to. Desirability implicates race. Within the film, the framework of desirability mirrors desirability seen in our lived reality. The desirables, those sought after, wielding social currency and subsequent power in the film, are popular and more noticeably, in contrast to Sue-Ann, are white and thin. Sue-Ann is fat and dark-skinned, both qualities resulting in her constant othering in the film and casting aside as undesirable. A black girl instinctively relegated to the bottom of the popularity and desirability pyramid, something akin to an object to be harshly toyed with, handled with little care, and perceived as holding little power. The former seen through the assaults Sue-Ann experiences as a child at school at the hands of her peers and the comments she's constantly subjected to by the teens. The latter we witness countless times as her capability of wielding power and inflicting harm is constantly overlooked by people around her because of her lack of desirability, even when Sue-Ann does do things clearly exemplifying manipulation and control. Sue-Ann's own desires find their roots buried deep in desirability, a desirability for whiteness that is wrapped up in what I do see Sue-Ann representing. Not a mammy figure, but a black suburbanite and the trauma and pain inflicted on black people existing in predominantly white suburbia, in physical proximity to whiteness and or with a desire for a more material proximity to whiteness. Sue-Ann's pursuit of friendship with the teens in both past and present stems from a desire for whiteness, a romantic pursuit of Ben Hawkins in her youth. Simultaneously, in present day, Sue-Ann engaging with the teens is linked to a pursuit of desirability as she aims to relive her childhood days through her relationship with the teens and rewrite her story, not to end in tragedy, but to end in achieving desirability through popularity.
Hey! Finally made it!
Hey!
Everyone is here!
Yeah! Well, it really is a great party.
When she first meets the teens, she decides to foster a relationship with them when she clocks Andy is Ben Hawkins' son. Throughout their relationship, Sue-Ann projects the images of the teens' parents onto the teens, seen through her predatory and less than subtle pursuit of Andy as a placeholder for Ben. In a similar sense, though her relationship with Maggie has a more tense undercurrent because of Maggie and Andy's relationship, Sue-Ann projects her previous friendship with Maggie's mother, Erica, onto her, as seen through her offering advice and warnings to Maggie about the danger of men like Andy.
You be careful now. Take it real slow. Men are dogs. They only want one thing. You don't want to mess your life up with the baby.
Flashbacks of her school days are interwoven with present-day scenes with the teens, each glimpse into the past mirroring moments occurring in the present. Interposing these flashbacks into the present day underlines the projection that's occurring, while also putting a magnifying glass to the parallels unfolding. For a moment, Sue-Ann seemingly accomplishes her goals of achieving desirability and popularity as her home is turned into a hotspot for the kids to get lit. However, as the film progresses in both past and present, we watch as Sue-Ann's relationship with both sets of teens turn sour, and a canon event in present day, the teens cutting her out of their lives, triggers feelings of being discarded, hurt, and anger, ultimately setting Sue-Ann on a path to revenge. Though Sue-Ann attempts to obtain what was robbed from her years ago through her relationship with the teenagers in present day, it is the very shadows of desirability and whiteness she's chasing that lead to her fate at the film's end, alone and left to die. White anxiety. Unbeknownst to Tate Taylor, his depiction of the violence perpetuated against Black women existing in proximity to whiteness and the ramifications awaiting Black women with the audacity to bite back when their desires are denied by whiteness exposes white guilt and anxieties around anti-Blackness. Ironically enough, Tate Taylor so glaringly being ooga-booga'd by race conversations that dare to be less shallow than a kiddie pool only served to further emphasize the anxieties and subsequent truths around anti-Blackness embedded in this film. In the narrative, Taylor invokes a question about accountability. In an interview with Daily Dead, he backdrops his question with horrific things happening in America and the world, referring specifically to the Me Too movement as he calls into question the complicity of bystanders of violence and injustice due to fear. And there are characters here that represent what that can do and what your part in things can be. A lot of things are being shed to light in the industry right now. Horrific attacks on women and on men. But what they don't talk about is often there were hundreds of people completely aware, men and women, gay and straight, who didn't do shit because they're afraid. Over the narrative hangs an overarching question. Should the teens be held accountable for the sins of their parents? Looking at the larger implications of accountability and race, however loath Taylor is to acknowledge their existence, it's hard to ignore the question staring back at my Black ass in neon colors. Should white people be held accountable for the sins of their ancestors? Lucky for us, Taylor takes it upon himself to answer this question through Maggie when she stabs Ma in the final act of the film and says,
I'm not my mother.
A corny, reductive-ass answer reflective of Taylor's perceptions of race and anti-Blackness in the film and in real life. So expected from a white man, I'm nearly bored to tears. An answer that so obviously would come from a person in a privileged position who has declared a refusal to delve into actual systems of oppression, opting to flatten them into one-note issues to assuage his own anxieties about the role he and his privilege play in complicity and upholding of these very structures. Because complicity is violence. An answer that is so calculating yet subtle, shifting empathy from the victim and onto the perpetrator with 4 words.